Wook stared at the ancient data file on his screen. The alien bureaucrat had been working in the Galactic Trade Consortium archives for over 30 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The file was old, very old. It came from a time when the galaxy was different, when many species were still learning to travel between stars. The contract was written in multiple languages. Some of them were dead now, spoken by species that no longer existed, but one language caught his attention. It was labeled as Human Standard English, from something called the Sol System. Wook had heard stories about humans. They were supposed to be a primitive species that had appeared briefly in galactic affairs many centuries ago. Most people believed they had destroyed themselves in some war. No one had seen or heard from humans in over 800 years. He read the contract. Carefully, it was simple and clear. The humans had provided military assistance to several alien worlds during what the records called the Expansion Wars. In return, the aliens had promised to pay the humans a specific amount of credits. The payment was supposed to happen 50 years after the contract was signed. But that was 847 years ago. Wook felt his stomach turn cold as he looked at the interest calculations. The original debt was only 10 million galactic credits, but with compound interest over 8 centuries, the amount now was enormous. He had to check his calculations 3 times to make sure he was reading it correctly. 847 trillion galactic credits. That was more money than some entire star systems were worth. It was enough to buy whole planets, entire fleets of warships, or the economic output of dozens of worlds for decades. Wook quickly sent a message to his supervisor, then to his supervisor's supervisor. Within hours, the contract had reached the highest levels of the consortium. By the end of the day, it was on the desk of the Galactic Trade Council itself. The council members read the document with growing amazement and then amusement. Chairwoman Bora, a tall alien with silver skin and 4 arms, laughed when she finished reading. "This is ridiculous," she said to the other council members. "Even if this contract is real, everyone knows the humans are extinct. They disappeared centuries ago. They were barely more advanced than animals when they first made contact with us." The other council members nodded in agreement. The humans had been known for being aggressive and unpredictable. Most species were happy when they vanished from galactic affairs. The galaxy had become much more peaceful without them. "We should just file this away and forget about it," said Council Member Vex, whose people controlled several important trade routes. Dead species cannot collect debts. But Wook was not so sure. He had spent his life working with ancient documents and contracts. He knew that the Trade Consortium took all agreements seriously, no matter how old they were. That was how business worked in the galaxy. Trust and honor were everything. "The contract is legally binding," Wook said carefully. "If any humans still exist, they would have the right to collect this debt." The council members looked at him like he was crazy. Chairwoman Bora waved one of her 4 hands dismissively. "Wook, you worry too much about old papers," she said. "The humans are gone. This is just an interesting piece of history, nothing more." For 3 days, the council debated what to do. Some members wanted to investigate whether any humans still existed. Others thought it was a waste of time and resources. In the end, they decided to do nothing. If humans still existed somewhere in the galaxy, they could come forward and make their claim officially. On the 4th day, something happened. That changed everything. The morning started normally at the consortium's main station. Ships came and went, carrying goods and passengers between thousands of worlds. Traders and diplomats filled the corridors, making deals and solving problems. It was just another busy day in the heart of galactic civilization. Then, at exactly noon station time, every sensor and communication system detected something impossible. A ship had appeared. It had not come out of hyperspace. It had not flown in from normal space. It had simply appeared, as if it had always been there but had suddenly become visible. The ship was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was sleek and dark, with smooth lines that seemed to bend light around them. It was large, bigger than most military vessels, but it moved with the grace of a small fighter. The ship sent a simple message on all frequencies. This is the human vessel Patience. We request permission to dock for official business regarding Galactic Trade Consortium Contract Number 21777 Sol Expansion. Please respond. Panic spread through the station's control center. Humans still existed. They were here, and they knew about the contract. Chairwoman Bora was called to the command center immediately. She stared at the human ship on the main screen, her silver skin turning pale. The vessel looked dangerous, even though it had made no threatening moves. What should we tell them? Asked the station commander, a nervous alien whose tentacles were shaking with fear. Bora tried to stay calm. Tell them they can dock. We will meet with their representative to discuss their claim. An hour later, a single human walked off the ship and into the station. His name was Taimin, and he looked exactly like the humans from old historical records. He was tall and walked upright on two legs. His skin was pale brown, and his black hair was cut short. He wore simple clothes that looked expensive but not flashy. But there was something different about him. Something that made even the bravest aliens step back when he passed. His eyes were calm and patient, but there was something behind them that spoke of great power and confidence. Taimin carried a small case in one hand. He walked through the station like he owned it, following directions to the council chambers. Aliens stopped and stared as he passed, whispering to each other in dozens of languages. When he reached the council chambers, Taimin was polite and respectful. He bowed slightly to Chairwoman Bora and the other council members. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," he said in perfect galactic standard language. "I am Taimin, speaking for humanity in the matter of Contract 2177 Sol Expansion." He opened his case and removed several documents. They were perfect copies of the original contract, along with detailed records of the military assistance humans had provided centuries ago. "As you can see," Taimin continued, "humanity fulfilled its obligations under this contract. We helped defend 12 worlds during the expansion wars. We lost many ships and many lives doing so. In return, we were promised payment that was due 847 years ago." Chairwoman Bora looked at the documents, then back at Taimin. "Even if this contract is valid, the amount with interest is impossible to pay. The consortium does not have 800 trillion credits available." Taimin smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "We understand that this may cause some difficulties. We are prepared to discuss payment arrangements." "And if we refuse to pay?" asked Council Member Vex. Taimin's smile did not change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "We hoped you would be reasonable. We prepared for disappointment." He reached into his case again and pulled out a small device. When he pressed a button, every screen in the council chamber lit up with the same image. Ships, thousands of them, human ships surrounding every major world, every trade station, every military base in the galaxy. They had been invisible until that moment, hidden by technology beyond anything the aliens had ever imagined. The debt will be paid, Taemin said quietly. One way or another. The images on the screen showed impossible things. Human ships floated near every important world in the galaxy. They were everywhere, and no one had seen them coming. The aliens in the council chamber stared in shock and fear. Chairwoman Bora's 4 hands shook as she pointed at the screens. This is some kind of trick. These images are fake. Taemin remained calm. He pressed another button on his device. Immediately, communication signals started coming in from across the galaxy. Station commanders, planetary governors, and fleet admirals all reported the same thing. Human ships had appeared everywhere at the same time. I assure you, these are not tricks, Taemin said. My people have been watching and waiting for a very long time. Council member Vex stood up quickly, his chair falling backward. Watching? How long have you been spying on us? Since the day you broke our contract, Taemin replied. 847 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Another human walked into the council chamber. He was younger than Taemin, with neat black hair and intelligent eyes. He carried a small bag of equipment. This is Ha-Jun, Taemin said. He will demonstrate some of our current technology to help you understand our capabilities. Ha-Jun bowed politely to the council, then opened his bag. He pulled out what looked like a simple metal cube, no bigger than his hand. He placed it on the table in front of the alien leaders. This is a basic power generator, Ha-Jun explained in simple words. It uses controlled fusion at the quantum level. The cube began to glow softly. Numbers appeared on the council chamber's computer. Screens. The energy readings were incredible. The small cube was producing more power than most starship engines. That is impossible, whispered the station's chief engineer, who had been called to watch the demonstration. Fusion reactions that small would explode instantly. Ha-Jun smiled and picked up the cube. It was cool to the touch, showing no signs of the enormous energy it was producing. We learned to do things differently while you forgot we existed. He put the cube away and pulled out another device. This one looked like a simple rod made of dark metal. When he touched one end, the rod extended into a long staff. When he touched it again, the staff became sharp on both ends. Another touch, and it returned to a small rod. Programmable matter, Ha-Jun said. We can make any tool or weapon we need, from the same basic materials. The alien leaders watched in amazement and growing fear. Their best scientists had been trying to create programmable matter for centuries. The humans made it look simple. Another human entered the chamber. This one was a woman with long black hair and a smile that made the aliens uncomfortable. She moved like a predator, smooth and dangerous. I am Ye-Jin, she said, bowing slightly. I handle cultural relations. Ye-Jin looked at each alien leader in turn. Her gaze was so intense that several of them looked away. We have been studying your civilizations for a very long time. We know your languages, your customs, your fears, and your weaknesses. She walked around the table where the aliens sat. Chairwoman Bora, you have been stealing money from the consortium treasury for 12 years. Council member Vex, your people still keep slaves on 7 different worlds, even though slavery is illegal under galactic law. The accused aliens turned pale. These were secrets that no outsider should know. How did you... Bora started to ask. We watch everything, Ye-Jin said simply. We listen to every communication. We see every transaction. We know every secret your civilizations have tried to hide. Taemin stepped forward again. We are not here to blackmail you or to expose your crimes. We are here for one simple thing: the debt you owe us. He activated his device again. New images appeared on the screens. These showed detailed plans of every major city, every military base, and every important building in the galaxy. The plans included things that should have been classified secrets. We have been preparing for this day for 8 centuries, Taemin continued. We know everything about your military forces, your economic systems, and your political structures. We could have taken everything we wanted at any time, but we chose to come here first and ask politely. Council Member Vex stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Taemin. This is extortion. You are threatening the entire galaxy. No, Taemin said calmly. We are collecting a debt. There is a difference. Chairwoman Bora tried to regain control of the situation. Even if we accept that this contract is valid, the amount is impossible to pay. 800 trillion credits would bankrupt half the galaxy. That is not our problem, Ye-Jin said with her predatory smile. You had 8 centuries to pay what you owed. You chose to ignore your debt instead. Hajun pulled another device from his bag. This one projected a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy in the air above the table. Red dots marked thousands of locations. These are assets that belong to species and organizations that signed the original contract, Hajun explained. Mining stations, factory worlds, trade fleets, and economic centers. Their combined value is approximately 850 trillion credits. The aliens realized what the humans were suggesting. They wanted to take control of major parts of the galactic economy to pay the debt. You cannot be serious, Bora said, her voice shaking. Those assets support billions of people across hundreds of worlds. Then perhaps you should have paid your debt when it was smaller, Taemin replied. Council Member Vex tried a different approach. Look, we understand that mistakes were made in the past, but the humans who made that contract are dead. The aliens who signed it are also dead. Why should we pay for something that happened so long ago? Ye-Jin's smile became even more dangerous. Because debts do not die with people. Because promises mean something. Because honor matters. She leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. And because some of us who remember that time are still alive. The aliens looked confused. Humans were supposed to have short lifespans, much shorter than most galactic species. Taemin saw their confusion. We learned many things during our time away from galactic society. Life extension was one of them. Some of our people have lived for over 1,000 years. They remember the promises you made. They remember the betrayals that followed. He pressed his device one more time. The screens now showed recordings from 8 centuries ago. Humans and aliens working together, fighting side by side against common enemies. The images were clear and detailed, much better than the aliens expected from such old technology. We kept our promises, Taemin said as the recordings played. We fought for you. We died for you. We saved your worlds and your people. And when the war was over, you decided you did not want to pay us. The final recording showed human ships leaving the galaxy, damaged and outnumbered. The humans had been forced to retreat, their requests for payment denied, their offers of friendship rejected. We went away to grow stronger, Taemin continued. We learned new technologies. We became more than we were. And we always planned to return, Chairwoman Bora looked around the table at her fellow council members. They all had the same expression of fear and helplessness. "What happens if we refuse to cooperate?" she asked quietly. Taemin's expression did not change. "Then we will take what we are owed by force, but we would prefer to handle this through proper legal channels." "You call this legal?" Vex shouted. "Surrounding our worlds with warships?" "We call it insurance," Ye-Jin said. "We want to make sure you do not try to run away again." Ha-Jun put his equipment back in his bag and stood up. "We will give you 24 hours to decide how you want to handle this situation. You can cooperate and work with us to arrange payment, or you can resist and face the consequences." The three humans walked toward the door of the council chamber. Before leaving, Taemin turned back to face the alien leaders one more time. "Choose wisely," he said. "The galaxy is watching, and this time we will not be ignored." 24 hours passed quickly. The Galactic Council spent every minute trying to find a way out of their situation. They called emergency meetings with military leaders, economic advisors, and legal experts. Every conversation ended the same way. There was no good solution. The humans had them completely surrounded. Every major world, every trade route, every military base was being watched by invisible ships. No one could move without human permission. Admiral Nari commanded the largest military fleet in the galaxy. She had fought in dozens of battles and never lost a single engagement. But when she looked at the reports from her ships, she felt afraid for the first time in her career. "We cannot even see them properly," she told the council through a secure communication link. "Our best sensors show fuzzy shadows where we think their ships are. When we try to lock weapons onto them, our targeting systems fail completely." Chairwoman Bora rubbed her temples with two of her hands. The stress was giving her a terrible headache. "What about a coordinated attack, if every fleet in the galaxy struck at the same time?" "That might work against a normal enemy," Nari replied. "But these are not normal ships. Our intelligence reports suggest they are using technology we do not understand. Some kind of advanced shielding that makes them nearly invisible and probably invulnerable." Council member Vex was pacing back and forth in the chamber. His people were known for being excellent traders and negotiators, but he had never faced anything like this situation. "There has to be something we can offer them besides money," he said. "Resources, territory, trade agreements, something." "I do not think they want any of those things," Bora replied. "They seem to only care about the debt." As they spoke, reports continued to come in from across the galaxy. The human ships were not just watching anymore. They were beginning to move on. The industrial world of Kepler-7, a dozen human vessels had surrounded the largest mining operation in the sector. The miners and their alien supervisors watched in terror as the dark ships hung motionless in space above them. Then one of the human ships sent a message. "This facility is now under human administration pending debt resolution. Continue your work as normal. Any attempt to remove resources from this location will be prevented." Similar messages were being sent to manufacturing centers, trade depots, and research facilities across hundreds of worlds. The humans were not destroying anything or hurting anyone. They were simply taking control. Du-Yan sat in the command center of her ship, watching the reports flow in from human forces throughout the galaxy. She was tall and thin, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. As the chief intelligence officer for the human fleet, she had spent centuries planning this moment. "Sector 7 reports all mining operations secured," said one of her assistants. "Sector 12 has taken control of the main trade hub," reported another. "Sector 23 is moving into position around the alien military academy." Du-Yan nodded at each report. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan, the plan she had been working on for over 800 years. "Send a message to Jin-Ho," she ordered. "Tell him Phase 2 is complete. We are ready to begin asset collection." Jin-Ho received the message aboard his command ship, which was positioned near the galactic capital. He was older than Do-Yan, with gray hair and scars on his hands from battles fought long ago. He had been a young soldier during the original war, one of the few humans who had survived the fighting and lived to see this day. "Begin Phase 3, he told his communications officer. "All units are authorized to start extraction procedures." Across the galaxy, human ships began to move toward their targets. They were no longer content to simply watch and wait. It was time to start collecting what they were owed. The first extraction happened at a rare metal mining facility on the edge of known space. The human ships appeared suddenly, their dark forms blocking out the stars. The alien workers on the facility sent panicked messages to their government begging for help. The help never came. Within hours, massive human machines had descended from the ships and begun dismantling the entire operation. They worked with impossible speed and precision, taking apart structures that had taken decades to build, but they were not destroying anything. Every piece of equipment, every processed metal, every valuable resource was carefully loaded onto human transport vessels. The aliens watched in amazement as their entire facility was efficiently packed away and carried off. "Where? Are you taking everything?" demanded the facility manager, an alien named Kos, who had worked there for 20 years. The human supervisor, a woman named Subin, answered politely. "These resources are being claimed as partial payment for the debt owed to humanity. You and your workers are free to leave. Transport ships will arrive shortly to take you to the nearest colony world." Kos could not believe what he was hearing. "But this facility belongs to the Kepler Mining Corporation. You cannot just steal it." Subin showed him a holographic document. It was a legal seizure order, properly filed with the Galactic Trade Consortium and signed by human authorities. "This is not theft," she explained calmly. "This is debt collection. The Kepler Mining Corporation was one of the signatories to the original contract. They owe humanity compensation for services rendered during the expansion wars." Similar scenes were playing out across hundreds of worlds. Human forces were systematically taking control of anything that belonged to the species and organizations that had originally hired them 8 centuries ago. They took mining facilities, factory complexes, research stations, and even entire trade fleets. Each operation was conducted with perfect efficiency. No one was hurt, but no resistance was tolerated either. Admiral Nari tried to organize a military response. She gathered the largest fleet she could manage, over 3,000 warships from dozens of different species. They would strike at the human forces near the galactic capital and try to break the blockade. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The alien fleet approached the human positions with all weapons ready. They had plasma cannons, missile launchers, and energy beams that could destroy entire cities. They were confident that sheer numbers would give them victory. The human ships did not even move. When the alien fleet opened fire, something impossible happened. Every weapon they fired simply disappeared. Plasma bolts, missiles, and energy beams vanished into nothing when they got close to the human vessels. "What is happening?" Nari demanded from her flagship. "Why are our weapons not working?" Her science officer stared at his instruments in confusion. "Admiral, the weapons are hitting some kind of barrier around the human ships, but it is not deflecting them or absorbing them. They are just gone." That is impossible. Yes, ma'am, but it is happening anyway, the human ships finally responded. They did not fire massive weapons or launch swarms of missiles. Instead, each human vessel simply pointed at one alien ship and fired a single, thin beam of blue light. Every alien ship that was targeted stopped working instantly. Their engines shut down, their weapons went dead, and their life support systems failed. The crews were not hurt, but their ships became floating pieces of metal. In less than 5 minutes, the entire alien fleet was helpless. Admiral Nari sat in her command chair, staring at the human ships that had defeated her so easily. Her proud fleet was now completely powerless, dependent on human mercy for basic life support. A message appeared on her main screen. It showed Jin Ho sitting calmly. In his command center, Admiral Nari, he said respectfully, "Your crews will be rescued and transported to safety. Your ships will be dismantled and their materials counted toward the debt payment. We suggest you do not attempt such actions again." The message ended, and Nari was left staring at a blank screen. In her entire military career, she had never felt so completely defeated. Meanwhile, Do-Yan was updating her reports. The human operation was proceeding perfectly. Hundreds of facilities had been seized, thousands of ships had been captured, and entire star systems were now under human control. "Estimated value of assets collected so far?" she asked her assistant. "Approximately 47 trillion credits. Ma'am," Do-Yan nodded. It was a good start, but they still had a long way to go. 800 trillion credits was an enormous amount, even for a galactic civilization. "Send a message to all human commanders," she ordered. "Phase 4 is authorized. Begin extraction of planetary assets." The message went out across the galaxy, and the human ships began to move toward their next targets. They were no longer just taking mining facilities and trade stations. Now they were going after entire worlds. The galaxy shuddered as humanity began to collect its debt in full. The planet Zentara had been one of the most beautiful worlds in the galaxy. It was covered with crystal forests that grew in perfect geometric patterns, creating structures that looked like living art. Millions of tourists visited every year to see the natural wonders and buy rare crystals that could only be found there. Hyunwoo stood on the observation deck of his extraction ship, watching the crystal forests being carefully harvested. His teams worked with incredible precision, using tools that could cut and shape the crystals without damaging them. Every piece was cataloged and loaded onto transport vessels. The local population watched in stunned silence as their world was systematically stripped of its most valuable resources. They had tried to protest, but the humans had shown them legal documents proving that Zentara's government had been one of the original contract signers 8 centuries ago. "How long will this take?" asked the planetary governor, an elderly alien named Kor who had ruled Zentara for over 40 years. Hyunwoo checked his schedule on a small device. "Approximately 6 days for complete resource extraction. We will leave the basic ecosystem intact, but all valuable crystals and rare minerals will be removed. This will destroy our economy," Kor said, his voice shaking with anger and desperation. "Those crystals are the only reason anyone comes to Zentara. Without them, we have nothing." "Then perhaps your ancestors should have paid their debts," Hyunwoo replied calmly. "We are not destroying your world. We are simply taking what belongs to us." He pointed to the extraction teams working in the distance. "Look at how carefully my people are working. We could strip this entire planet in a few hours if we wanted to. Instead, we are taking months to preserve the ecosystem and protect your cities." Governor Kor had to admit that the humans were being surprisingly careful. They had warned all civilians to stay away from the work areas, and they had not damaged a single building or injured a single person. But they were still taking away everything that made Zentara special. Similar operations were happening on hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. The humans had identified every planet, station, and facility that belonged to species who had signed the original contract. They were systematically extracting resources from all of them. On the industrial world of Rigel 9, human machines were dismantling entire factories and loading them onto massive transport ships. The process was so efficient that it looked almost like magic. Buildings that had taken years to construct were taken apart in hours. The factory workers stood and watched as their livelihoods disappeared before their eyes. Many of them had worked in these factories their entire lives, just like their parents and grandparents before them. Subin walked among the displaced workers, offering them information packets about relocation opportunities. She spoke their language perfectly and answered all their questions with patience and kindness. "Where will we go?" asked an elderly worker whose family had lived on Rigel 9 for generations. "We have identified several worlds with similar industrial needs," Subin explained. "Transport will be provided free of charge, and our relocation specialists will help you find new employment." "But this is our home," the worker protested. Subin's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I understand. But your government chose to break a contract with my people. They chose to steal from us rather than pay what they owed. These are the consequences of that choice." She handed the worker a data pad with information about available relocation sites. "We are not trying to be cruel. We are simply collecting what belongs to us. Your leaders had 8 centuries to find another way to solve this problem. They chose to ignore it instead." The most dramatic extraction was happening in the Vega system, where humans were harvesting an entire star. The aliens watching could barely believe what they were seeing. Massive human ships surrounded the star like insects around a light, using technology that seemed impossible. They were somehow capturing the star's energy and matter, storing it in containers that looked impossibly small for the amount of material they held. The star grew dimmer each day as the humans took what they needed from it. "They are stealing a star," whispered Dr. Yex, a famous astrophysicist who had come to study the human operation. "I did not think such technology could exist." The human supervisor on the project was a man named Kyung-Soo, who patiently explained the process to any scientists who asked questions. "We are not stealing the star," he corrected. "We are harvesting approximately 0.3% of its mass and energy. This will reduce its brightness slightly, but will not affect the planetary systems that depend on it." "But how is this possible?" Dr. Yex asked. "The energy requirements alone should be impossible." Kyung-Soo smiled. "We had 8 centuries to develop new technologies. We learned to do many things that others consider impossible." The impact of the human operations was being felt across the entire galaxy. Trade routes were disrupted as humans took control of key facilities. Entire industries shut down as their resources were claimed for debt payment. Stock markets crashed as investors realized the scope of what was happening. Refugee camps sprang up on worlds that had not signed the original contract. Millions of aliens fled their homes as humans claimed everything of value from their planets. The refugees were treated well. Humans provided food, shelter, and medical care, but they had lost everything they had spent their lives building. Kyle was one of these refugees. He had been a successful business owner on a trading station until the humans arrived and claimed the entire facility. Now he lived in a temporary shelter on a crowded refugee world, trying to figure out how to rebuild his life. "This is not justice," he said to other refugees gathered around a small fire. "This is revenge. The humans are punishing us for things that happened before most of us were even born." An older alien named Zara shook her head. "No, this is what happens when promises are broken. I was alive during the expansion wars. I remember when the humans came to help us fight the raiders who were destroying our worlds." She stared into the fire, remembering painful events from long ago. "The humans saved my planet. They lost many ships and many lives doing it. And when the war was over, our leaders decided they did not want to pay what they had promised." "But that was not our fault," Kale protested. "We were not the ones who made those decisions." "Neither were the humans who died fighting for us," Zara replied. "But they paid the price anyway. Now it is our turn to pay." The human operations continued with relentless efficiency. Every day brought new reports of facilities claimed, resources extracted, and assets seized. The humans worked around the clock, using advanced technology that made the process faster than anyone thought possible. But they were not just taking things randomly. Every action was planned and documented. Every seized asset was carefully evaluated and cataloged. The humans kept detailed records of everything they took and exactly how much it was worth. Progress reports were sent to the Galactic Council every day. The numbers were staggering. In just 2 weeks, the humans had collected assets worth over 200 trillion credits. They were working their way through the debt at an incredible pace. Chairwoman Bora read the latest report with growing horror. At this rate, the humans would collect the full 800 trillion credits within 6 months. But the cost to galactic civilization would be enormous. "Entire star systems will be economically ruined," she told the council during an emergency meeting. "Billions of people will lose their homes and jobs. It will take decades for the galaxy to recover from this." Council member Vex had aged visibly in the past few weeks. The stress of the situation was affecting his health. "Can we negotiate with them? Offer them something else instead of continuing these extractions?" "We have tried," Bora replied. "They refuse to discuss any alternative payment methods. They want exactly what the contract specifies, plus interest, plus penalties for late payment." The council had sent diplomatic missions to every human facility, begging for mercy or alternative arrangements. The humans were always polite and professional, but their answer was always the same. The debt would be paid in full. Some alien governments tried to resist. They declared the human actions illegal and attempted to organize military responses. These efforts failed completely. The humans had overwhelming technological superiority and perfect intelligence about alien capabilities. Any ship that approached a human operation was disabled instantly. Any weapon fired at human forces simply disappeared. Any attempt to interfere with the extraction process was stopped before it could begin. The message was clear. The humans would take what they were owed, and nothing could stop them. As the weeks passed, the true scope of human preparation became obvious. They had spent 8 centuries planning for this moment. They had studied every alien species, learned every technology, and prepared for every possible response. They knew exactly what they wanted and where to find it. They had backup plans for their backup plans. They had anticipated every strategy. The aliens might use and prepared countermeasures for all of them. It was the most thoroughly planned operation in galactic history, and it was being executed with perfect precision. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the price of breaking. 3 months had passed since the human debt collection began. The galaxy was in chaos. Trillions of credits worth of resources had been seized. Entire star systems were economically ruined. Refugee camps overflowed with displaced aliens who had lost everything. The Galactic Council was desperate. They had tried everything they could think of: diplomacy, military action, economic pressure, legal challenges. Nothing worked. The humans continued their systematic collection of assets with cold efficiency. In a secret meeting room deep beneath the capital city, the galaxy's most powerful leaders gathered to discuss their final options. The room was shielded against all forms of surveillance, or so they hoped. "We need to try something the humans will not expect," said General Mox, commander of the Centauri Defense Force. "They seem to know everything about our conventional capabilities." Dr. Fenn, the galaxy's leading expert on temporal mechanics, leaned forward. "I have been working on a theoretical project for decades, time manipulation technology. If we could go back and prevent the original contract from being signed..." Chairwoman Bora looked interested for the first time in weeks. "Is such a thing possible?" "In theory, yes," Dr. Fenn replied. "The energy requirements would be enormous, and the risks are significant. But it might be our only chance to undo this disaster." Council member Vex was skeptical. "Even if we could change the past, would the humans not notice? They seem to have technology beyond anything we understand." "That is a risk we might have to take," Bora said. "What other options do we have?" While the aliens planned their desperate time travel scheme, other groups were pursuing different strategies. The Omega Syndicate, a powerful criminal organization, decided to try espionage and sabotage. They had the best spies and assassins in the galaxy. If anyone could infiltrate human operations and cause problems, it would be them. They began planning strikes against human extraction facilities. At the same time, the Psi Corps was attempting psychic warfare. They gathered their most powerful telepaths and tried to attack human minds directly. It was a dangerous strategy, but they were running out of options. None of these groups knew that their plans were being watched. Dong Hyun sat in his monitoring station aboard a human command ship, reading reports from surveillance teams across the galaxy. As the human temporal warfare specialist, he was responsible for detecting and preventing any attempts to alter the timeline. "Temporal distortion detected in Sector 15, reported one of his assistants. "Looks like someone is trying to build a time manipulation device." Dong Hyun smiled. He had been expecting this. The aliens always turned to time travel when conventional methods failed. "Send a team to investigate. Standard temporal protection protocols." His assistant nodded and began sending orders to human forces in that sector. In another part of the ship, Mi Young was coordinating counterintelligence operations. She had spent decades studying alien spy networks and criminal organizations. She knew exactly what they would try to do. "The Omega Syndicate is planning strikes against facilities. In Sectors 7, 12, and 23, she told her team. "I want surveillance on all their key operatives. Let them make their plans, but do not let them actually carry out any attacks." "What about the Psi Corps telepathic assault?" asked one of her agents. Mi Young checked her reports. "That one is more interesting. Let them try their psychic attacks. It will be educational for them to learn why that does not work on human minds." She had good reasons to be confident. Humans had developed strong mental defenses during their 8 centuries of preparation. Alien telepaths would find human minds impossible to penetrate or influence. Meanwhile, a different kind of meeting was taking place on the human command ship. June, the human philosopher and cultural advisor, was speaking with a group of alien representatives who had requested a formal dialogue. The aliens hoped that by appealing to human ethics and morality, they might convince the debt collectors To show mercy, they had chosen their most eloquent speakers and most respected moral leaders for this mission. "Surely you can see that innocent people are suffering," pleaded Ambassador Rex, a dignified alien known throughout the galaxy for his wisdom. "Children are losing their homes. Families are being separated. Entire cultures are being destroyed." June listened patiently, then replied in a calm voice. "These are indeed tragic consequences, but they are consequences of choices made by your leaders 8 centuries ago. But we are not responsible for those ancient decisions," Rex protested. "Neither were the human children who died when your ancestors broke their promises," June responded. "Neither were the human families separated when your people drove us from the galaxy. Neither were the human cultures that were lost when we were forced to flee and rebuild our civilization in exile." The alien representatives looked uncomfortable. They had hoped to avoid talking about ancient history. June continued. "You speak of innocent suffering as if it is something new, as if humans have not been suffering for 8 centuries because of your people's actions. Why should your innocence matter more than ours did?" "Because 2 wrongs do not make a right," Ambassador Rex said desperately. "Revenge does not heal old wounds." "This is not revenge," June explained patiently. "This is justice. We are not seeking to harm you beyond what is necessary to collect what you owe us. We are not trying to destroy your civilizations or enslave your people. We simply want to be paid for services we provided in good faith." He activated a holographic display showing images from the expansion wars 8 centuries ago. Human ships fighting alongside alien vessels. Human soldiers dying to protect alien worlds. Human families mourning their lost loved ones. "Your ancestors promised to pay us for our sacrifice," June said. "When they broke that promise, they taught the galaxy that human lives and human honor had no value. We are here to correct that lesson." The first alien attempt at sabotage came 3 days later. A team of Omega Syndicate operatives tried to infiltrate a human mining operation on Kepler-7. They were highly trained professionals who had successfully completed hundreds of dangerous missions. They were captured before they even reached the facility perimeter. The human security team was led by a woman named HFY, who had been expecting this exact attack for weeks. She knew the names, faces, and complete histories of every operative in the assault team. "Welcome to Kepler-7, she said politely as the captured spies were brought before her. "We have been waiting for you." The team leader, a professional assassin named Krex, stared at her in disbelief. "How did you know we were coming?" "We have been monitoring your organization for decades," HFY explained. "We know all your safe houses, all your communication codes, and all your operational procedures. This mission was compromised before you even left your base." She showed them detailed files on each team member, including personal information that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. Your real names, your family backgrounds, your training records, your previous missions. "We know everything about you," HFY continued. "In fact, we know more about your organization than most of your own leaders do. The captured operatives were treated well but held securely. They would be released after the debt collection was complete, but their mission had failed completely." Tjapt. Psi-Corps telepathic assault was even less successful. The alien psychics had gathered their most powerful minds for a coordinated attack on human consciousness. They attempted to cause confusion, fear, and mental instability among the human crews. Nothing happened. The human minds they tried to attack were completely shielded. Not only could the telepaths not influence human thoughts, They could not even sense them. It was as if the humans did not exist in the psychic realm at all. "This is impossible," said Telepath Prime Zek, the most powerful psychic in the galaxy. "Every sentient mind produces some kind of psychic energy. But these humans are completely blank." What the aliens did not know was that humans had developed mental shielding technology centuries ago. Every human wore a small device that made their thoughts invisible to telepathic detection. The technology was so advanced that even the most sensitive psychic instruments could not penetrate it. The time travel attempt was the most ambitious alien plan. Dr. Fenn had secretly built a temporal manipulation device using technology borrowed from a dozen different species. The plan was to send a small team back in time to prevent the original contract from being signed. The device was hidden in a remote asteroid field, powered by illegal energy sources and protected by advanced stealth technology. Dr. Fenn was confident that the humans could not detect it. He was wrong. Dong Hyun arrived at the temporal facility with a full human strike team just as the aliens were preparing to activate their device. He walked calmly into the control room as if he had been invited. "Dr. Fenn," he said politely, "I am afraid I cannot allow you to proceed with this experiment." Dr. Fenn stared at him in shock. "How did you find us? This facility is completely hidden." "We have been monitoring temporal energy fluctuations throughout the galaxy," Dong Hyun explained. "Any attempt to build time manipulation technology creates detectable distortions in space-time. We noticed your project 3 weeks ago." The truth about humanity's past had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Ancient records were being uncovered on dozens of worlds. Historians were re-examining old documents and finding evidence of the cover-up that had hidden human heroism for 8 centuries. But knowledge of the truth did not stop the human debt collection. If anything, it made the process more systematic and more final. The humans were no longer just taking resources. They were making judgments about entire civilizations. Kyung-soo stood on the observation deck of his command ship, looking down at the world of Korax Prime. It was a beautiful planet, covered with blue oceans and green continents. Millions of intelligent beings lived on its surface, going about their daily lives without knowing that their fate was being decided in the ship above them. As the Human Justice Coordinator, Kyung-soo had the terrible responsibility of determining which species deserved to survive and which had committed crimes too serious to forgive. He did not make these decisions lightly or quickly. Each judgment was based on centuries of careful observation and detailed evidence. His assistant brought him a datapad containing the complete file on the Koraxian civilization. It was thousands of pages long, documenting 8 centuries of Koraxian history, culture, and actions. "Summary," Kyung-soo asked, though he already knew the contents of the file. "The Koraxians were primary instigators of the betrayal of humanity," his assistant reported. "They proposed the plan to attack human ships after the expansion wars. They led the military assault that forced humanity to flee the galaxy. They were also responsible for most of the historical revisionism that portrayed humans as villains." Kyung-soo nodded grimly. The Koraxians had been among humanity's most trusted allies during the war, which made their betrayal even more painful. They had used their friendship with humans to learn about human weaknesses, then used that knowledge to plan their attack. "Any mitigating factors?" he asked. "Some," his assistant replied. 3% of the Koraxian population opposed the attack on humanity. They were executed by their own government for treason. Additionally, current Koraxian leadership has acknowledged historical crimes and formally apologized for their ancestors' actions. It was more than most species had done. But it was not enough. The Coraxians had not just betrayed humanity, they had led the conspiracy to erase human history and paint them as villains. The consequences of their actions had shaped 8 centuries of galactic development. Kyung-Soo made his decision. Category 7 Judgment. Civilization termination with individual evaluation for survivors. His assistant recorded the judgment in the official files. Within hours, human ships would begin the process of dismantling Coraxian civilization. Their cities would be evacuated, their technology confiscated, and their population scattered to primitive colony worlds. Some individuals might be allowed to survive if they could prove they were not complicit in their ancestors' crimes, but Coraxian society would cease to exist. It was a harsh judgment, but not the harshest. Some species received Category 8 or Category 9 judgments, which meant complete extinction. The humans had identified several civilizations that were so corrupt and cruel that they were considered beyond redemption. In another part of the galaxy, HFY was conducting a very different kind of evaluation. She stood in the council chambers of the Zalani Confederation, reviewing their historical record with their current leadership. The Zalani were one of the few species that had tried to help humanity during the betrayal 8 centuries ago. They had voted against the attack and had even sent ships to assist human evacuation efforts. Though they had been unsuccessful in stopping the conspiracy, they had at least tried to do the right thing. Your species has shown consistent honor and compassion throughout your history, HFY told the Zalani leaders. You opposed slavery when it was profitable. You protected refugees when it was dangerous. You tried to help humanity when everyone else turned against us. The Zalani chancellor, an elderly being with silver fur and kind eyes, looked relieved but confused. Does this mean we will be spared from the debt collection? You will be spared from judgment, HFY clarified. But you still owe money. Your government did sign the original contract, and you did benefit from human military assistance during the expansion wars. She pulled out a data pad showing the Zalani debt calculation. Your total obligation is 47 billion credits, plus interest. However, given your historical conduct, we are prepared to offer very generous payment terms. The Chancellor looked at the numbers with surprise. Other species were being charged trillions of credits, but the Zalani debt was relatively small. Why is our obligation so much lower? Because we are only charging you for the actual costs of our military assistance to your worlds, HFY explained. We are not including punitive damages or compound interest penalties. We are treating you as honored debtors rather than betrayers. It was a crucial distinction. Species that had betrayed humanity were being charged for every possible cost and penalty. Species that had shown honor were being charged only what they actually owed, with reasonable payment terms and no additional punishments. The Zalani would survive as a civilization. They would remain free and independent, though they would be, under informal human oversight to ensure they continued to behave honorably. The process of judgment was being repeated across hundreds of worlds. Human evaluation teams were reviewing the historical conduct of every species that had been involved in the original events. The judgments they rendered would determine the future of galactic civilization. Some species, like the Coraxians, were marked for extinction or dissolution. Their crimes against humanity had been too severe to forgive, and their subsequent behavior showed no signs of genuine reform. Others were given intermediate punishments. Their civilizations would be reduced in size and power, their populations relocated to less desirable worlds, their technology confiscated or restricted. They would survive, but as minor powers rather than galactic leaders. A few species, like the Zilani, were treated with relative mercy. They would pay their debts and submit to human oversight, but they would be allowed to maintain their independence and dignity. The most surprising judgments involved species that had not even existed during the original betrayal. Some younger civilizations were judged harshly because they had embraced the corrupt culture that emerged after humanity's exile. Others were treated well because they had developed honorable societies despite the bad example set by their elders. Nova was a young representative of the Asterian Republic, a civilization that had achieved spaceflight only 2 centuries ago. She had come to meet with human officials to learn what fate awaited her people. The Asterians had known nothing about the original human-alien conflict. They had learned galactic history from the same false records that everyone else used. But their own conduct as a species had been exemplary. They had never started wars, never practiced slavery, and never broken important treaties. Nova was nervous as she entered the human evaluation chamber. She had heard terrible stories about what was happening to other species, and she feared for her people's future. "Please be seated," said the human official, a woman named Acha who served as a cultural ambassador. "We have completed our evaluation of Asterian civilization." Nova sat down, trying to control her fear. "What is your judgment?" "Your people are innocent of historical crimes against humanity," Acha said gently. "You had no involvement in the original betrayal, and your society has developed along honorable lines. You will be placed in Category 1 status." "What does that mean?" Nova asked. "It means you will be treated as friends and allies," Acha explained. "You will owe no debt to humanity, and you will be offered full partnership in the new galactic order we are establishing." Nova could barely believe what she was hearing. While other species were being destroyed or reduced to primitive conditions, her people were being offered friendship and alliance with the most powerful force in the galaxy. "Why?" she asked. "We are small and weak compared to other civilizations. Size and strength are not what matter to us," Acha replied. "Honor matters, truth matters, compassion matters. Your people have shown all of these qualities, even when it would have been easier to choose corruption and cruelty. The human judgments were reshaping the entire galaxy. Species that had ruled for millennia were being reduced to nothing, while smaller civilizations that had shown honor were being elevated to positions of influence and respect. The message was clear. The new galactic order would be based on merit and conduct rather than size and power. Civilizations that embraced honor, truth, and compassion would prosper. Those that chose corruption, cruelty, and deception would face the consequences of their choices. But the humans were not finished. As the debt collection continued and the judgments were implemented, it became clear that this was only the beginning of the changes they planned to make. They were not just collecting money or punishing their enemies, they were rebuilding galactic civilization from the ground up. The old galaxy, with its corrupt trade practices, endless wars, and casual. 1 year had passed since the humans began collecting their debt. The galaxy was fundamentally transformed. Ancient civilizations had fallen, new alliances had formed, and the balance of power had shifted completely. But now, as the debt collection neared completion, the humans were ready to implement the final phase of their plan. Jun Seo stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly, representing species and civilizations that had survived the human judgment process. The assembly hall was much smaller than the old Galactic Council chambers. Many of the seats were empty, representing civilizations that no longer existed. As the human overseer for galactic reconstruction, Junseo had the responsibility of establishing the new order that would govern the galaxy for centuries to come. He carried with him a document that would change everything: the new Galactic Charter. Representatives of the surviving civilizations, he began formally. We gather today to establish a new foundation for galactic society, one based on honor, truth, and justice rather than power, corruption, and deception. The alien representatives listened quietly. They had no choice but to accept whatever the humans proposed, but many were curious about what kind of galaxy the humans intended to create. Junseo activated a holographic display showing the structure of the new government. The Galactic Assembly will be the primary governing body for interspecies relations. However, unlike the old Galactic Council, membership will be based on merit rather than military or economic power. The new system was revolutionary. Instead of giving the largest civilizations the most votes, the Charter would grant representation based on a complex formula that considered historical conduct, current behavior, population, and contribution to galactic welfare. Species like the Zilani, who had shown consistent honor throughout their history, would have significant influence despite their small size. Meanwhile, civilizations that had survived the human judgment but still showed signs of corruption would have limited voting rights until they proved they had reformed. This seems designed to favor smaller, weaker civilizations, observed Representative Kex, whose people had received a moderate judgment and were being allowed to survive with reduced territory. It is designed to favor honorable civilizations, Junseo corrected. Size and strength without honor have been the source of most galactic conflicts for millennia. Under the new charter, influence will be earned through conduct, not conquest. HFY stepped forward to address the assembly. As the human cultural ambassador, she had spent months working with surviving civilizations to help them understand and adapt to the new system. The Charter includes several fundamental principles that all member civilizations must accept. She explained. First, slavery in any form is permanently banned throughout the galaxy. Second, treaties and contracts must be honored completely and in good faith. Third, historical records must be accurate and cannot be altered for political purposes. These principles seemed simple, but they would eliminate most of the corruption that had plagued galactic civilization for centuries. Species would no longer be able to rewrite history to hide their crimes, break promises without consequences, or exploit weaker neighbors. What about enforcement? Asked Representative Yax, whose people had been among the few to receive Category 1 status as human allies. How will these principles be maintained? Junseo smiled slightly. Humans will maintain monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. We will watch for violations of the Charter and respond appropriately when they occur. The message was clear but unspoken. Human oversight would be permanent. The galaxy would never again be free to ignore its moral obligations or betray those who trusted them. Nova, the young Asterian representative, raised her hand tentatively. Will humans govern the galaxy directly? No, HFY replied. We have no desire to rule over other species. We will provide guidance and enforcement when necessary, but day-to-day governance will remain with individual civilizations and the Galactic Assembly. It was a careful balance. Humans would have the power to intervene when serious problems arose, but they would not micromanage galactic affairs. They wanted to create a system that could eventually operate honorably without constant supervision. The Charter also included provisions for economic reconstruction. The galaxy's economy had been devastated by the debt collection, but the humans had plans to rebuild it along more equitable lines. Trade monopolies are banned, Junseo announced. No single species or organization can control access to essential resources or technologies. Competition must be fair, and weaker civilizations must be protected from economic exploitation. The old system had allowed powerful civilizations to dominate trade routes and exclude smaller species from profitable markets. Under the new charter, such practices would be illegal and would be met with swift human intervention. Dr. Wren, the alien archaeologist who had helped expose the historical truth about humanity, was given a special role in the new order. He would lead the Historical Truth Commission, responsible for correcting 8 centuries of false records and ensuring that accurate history was taught throughout the galaxy. Every school, every library, every database will contain the true history of human contact and the expansion wars, Dr. Wren announced. Future generations will learn about the consequences of betraying allies and breaking promises. The truth would serve as both education and warning. Young beings throughout the galaxy would grow up knowing that humanity had once offered friendship and had been betrayed, but had returned stronger and more determined than ever. As the months passed, the new system began to take effect. Species that embraced the Charter's principles found themselves prospering under human protection. Those that resisted faced increasing isolation and pressure. The Minthari had been a minor civilization that survived the human judgment with Category 2 status. They had committed no serious historical crimes but had developed a culture of casual dishonesty in their business dealings. Under the old system, this had been considered normal and acceptable. But when Minthari traders tried to continue their old practices of fraud and deception, they discovered that the new galaxy had no tolerance for such behavior. Human monitoring detected their crimes immediately, and the penalties were swift and severe. Within months, Minthari society had undergone a complete transformation. Honesty became not just a virtue, but a necessity for survival. Children were taught that lying and cheating would bring terrible consequences not just for themselves, but for their entire civilization. Meanwhile, the Asterian Republic was thriving under the new system. Their natural honesty and compassion made them ideal partners for human-led reconstruction efforts. They were given access to advanced technologies and profitable trade routes that had been denied to them under the old corrupt system. Nova, now a senior ambassador, often found herself amazed by how much her people's lives had improved. A year. Ago, we were a minor civilization struggling to be noticed by the galactic powers, she told Acha during one of their regular meetings. Now we are partners in rebuilding the galaxy itself. Your people earned their position through their conduct, Acha replied. The old system rewarded size and aggression. The new system rewards honor and wisdom. But the most dramatic changes were happening to human society itself. After 8 centuries of exile and preparation, humanity was finally ready to rejoin galactic civilization. But they would not be returning as the same species that had left. Human cities began appearing throughout the galaxy, built with technology that seemed almost magical to other species. These cities floated in space, independent of any planet, and could move between star systems as needed. They served as monitoring stations, trade centers, and symbols of human power. The humans themselves had changed as well. Life extension technology meant that many of them were centuries old, with wisdom and experience far beyond what other species could imagine. They spoke dozens of languages, understood hundreds of cultures, and could think in timescales that spanned millennia. Yet despite their power and advanced technology, the humans remained surprisingly humble and approachable. They did not demand worship or submission from other species. They simply insisted on honesty, honor, and justice. We learned something important during our exile, Yunji explained to a gathering of young representatives from various species. Power without wisdom leads to corruption. Strength without compassion leads to cruelty. We became powerful so that we could protect justice, not so that we could dominate others. The old woman was now considered one of the most influential beings in the galaxy, not because of any official position, but because of the respect she commanded from both humans and aliens alike. As the second year of the new order began, first, contact protocols were established for species that might achieve spaceflight in the future. The galaxy had learned the importance of treating new civilizations with respect and honor rather than exploitation and deception. The protocols were based on humanity's own bitter experience. New species would be welcomed with friendship and genuine offers of assistance. They would be protected from exploitation by more advanced,